Hey there, viewers. Have you ever watched someone go from totally quiet to completely unhinged and you just knew something was wrong? If you've seen it, you don't forget it. That's what one nurse says happened after Diddy got his dose. Hours later, he started screaming. And now she's breaking her silence on what she saw. Let's get into it. Chapter 1. I was assigned to Cellblock F that morning. I've been working the medical rotation at MDC Brooklyn for going on 14 years now, long enough that I've stopped counting the number of inmates who've bled, screamed, or begged in front of me. It's all just noise after a while. People think the worst part of the job is the violence or the filth or maybe the screaming in the middle of the night, but it's not. It's the sameness of it. Every day feels like you're crawling through the same muddy ditch. Only the names change. The ones with names that mean something outside these walls, they don't impress me either. We've had rappers, politicians, a bishop once. All of them bleed the same when they get cut, and most of them cry too, eventually. Doesn't matter how tough they looked on the outside. So when I saw the name S. Combs on my assignment list that morning, it didn't register right away. I'd been up since 4:15. Coffee tasted like dishwater, and my feet already hurt before I even clocked in. It was only when I was halfway through reviewing the daily med chart that I noticed the red line under the initials. Not red pen, digital. System issued alert. That's when I leaned in and read the rest. Do not administer medication without prior oversight clearance. Full caps, stamped across his profile like some kind of warning label. That kind of language usually means either the inmate's part of an ongoing psych eval or someone way higher up is watching their case, sometimes both. I asked Marcy, our intake clerk, if there'd been a transfer I missed. She looked over her glasses real slow and said, "Yeah, they moved him into F block late last night, some kind of hush-hush thing. Came in through the service gate, not even main intake." Then she smirked like she thought that was cute. "You'll have fun with that one. F block isn't where we usually stick the high-profile types." That's what bothered me. When we had Sam Bankman-Fried here last year, they kept him up in protective. Same with that ex-DEA agent who got picked up in that trafficking ring. But Cellblock F is different. It's not exactly isolation, not officially, but the guys who end up there aren't mixed with general pop. It's mostly the no one knows what to do with them crowd. People with weird court orders, sensitive health stuff, or behavioral anomalies that haven't been diagnosed yet. I kept thinking about that line in the file. Oversight. Not admin, not supervisor, not medical clearance, just oversight. I'd only seen that twice before in my whole career, and both times it was tied to inmates whose files were sealed so tight I couldn't even see their intake notes. Still, orders are orders. I took the new clipboard and packed my med cart, blood pressure cuffs, glucose kits, some standard antibiotics, and a couple extra latex gloves. I don't know why I grabbed those. Just a hunch, maybe. The walk down to F block took me past 3 locked security doors. Each buzzed open slower than the last, like the whole building was trying to keep me from going there. The walls in this section have this gray-green paint that looks sick under fluorescent light. And there's a hum in the ceiling. You don't notice it unless you're listening for it, but once you hear it, it's there, drilling into your teeth. The guard posted at F block didn't say a word when I arrived. Just nodded and buzzed me in. I wheeled the cart through and saw the familiar row of doors. Thick plexiglass windows, steel doors, and that heavy silence that means someone inside is awake but pretending not to be. I stopped at cell 17. That's where they'd put him. Sean Combs was sitting on the edge of the bunk, elbows on knees, head down. When I knocked on the glass, he looked up. That was the first time I saw him properly. He looked worse than I expected. Not just older, not just tired. Something else. His eyes, they didn't focus on me like normal. They flicked around the room, like he was trying to keep track of something moving behind him. His beard was full of gray. Not salt and pepper, pure ash. His skin looked dry, like he'd been sweating for days without enough water, and his lips split at the corners, like he'd been grinding his teeth in his sleep. He didn't say anything right away, just watched me through the glass while I checked the notes on his chart. I told him I was there to do a basic check-in, no meds without further instruction, just vitals, maybe a few questions. "You brought the tray?" he asked finally, voice low but clear. "I did. Standard meal, water too." He stood slowly, like every joint hurt, and walked to the door. "They're trying to poison me," he said, looking right into my face like I was supposed to already know. I've heard that before. Lots of inmates think the food's laced or the water's contaminated, or that we're running some kind of chemical experiment on them. It's usually tied to schizophrenia or extreme stress, and considering what he's accused of, I'd expect him to be paranoid. But the way he said it, it didn't sound like fear. It sounded like a script, like something he'd practiced saying, measured, controlled. "Noted," I said, keeping my voice calm. "You don't have to eat it, just need to document the refusal." He tilted his head. "Doesn't matter if I eat it. They already gave it to me. Just waiting for it to activate." I didn't reply, just logged his statement, marked meal refused, and told him I'd be back later. He didn't protest, just went back to the bunk and sat down again. Didn't move, not even to watch me leave. By the time I returned to the med unit, my hands were shaking a little. I'm not proud of that. I don't get rattled easy, but something about him set me off, like he wasn't fully there. Or maybe, like there was more than just him in that cell. I tried to shake it off, cleaned the cart, logged my rounds, and went to grab supplies for the next hour. When I opened the main supply drawer, that's when I saw it. A blister pack, sealed, untouched, not labeled like anything I'd stocked. The label read, "Red Line," classified in plain block print. I looked at the sheet next to it, my name, my handwriting, logged this morning, only I never wrote that. The signature was mine, but the ink was too fresh, like it had just dried. The log said I'd signed for the dose at 3:10 a.m. It was only 8:45, and I hadn't been near the drawer all day. I picked up the blister pack, turned it over. No barcode, no dosage information. Just one small red pill sealed in thick plastic, like it was never meant to be opened. Behind me, I thought I heard someone clear their throat. When I turned, no one was there. I stood there for a while, just holding the thing, listening to the hum in the ceiling again. It sounded louder now, like it was coming from inside the room. Or maybe from inside me. Red Line wasn't in the system. First thing I did when I got back to the med ward was take the Red Line blister pack and try to scan it into our system. It should have been simple. Every drug we handle, even the special order stuff, goes into the same archive. We use this old internal cataloging system that's been around since long before I got here. Outdated, glitchy, but thorough. Type in part of a name, it spits out dosage, manufacturer, chemical class. Anything that gets administered is traceable. But Red Line wasn't in there. Not under brand, not under generics. I even tried cross-referencing the pill description, small red capsule, no imprint, but it kicked back nothing. Just a blank screen and a blinking cursor, like the system was waiting for me to type something it already knew I wouldn't find. I stared at the blister pack sitting next to the keyboard. It looked out of place, too clean, too new, like someone had designed it to feel futuristic, the kind of packaging that didn't belong in a crumbling federal detention center with water-stained ceiling tiles and chairs that creaked when you breathed too hard. After a few more failed entries, I logged out and took the pack straight to my supervisor. Harris is the kind of guy who's been here even longer than I have, which is saying something. Former field medic, now nursing admin, burnt out beyond belief, smells like stale coffee and menthols. His office is always dark, blinds drawn, even though it faces the courtyard. He barely looked up when I walked in. "I found something weird in my drawer this morning," I said. He grunted. "Half the things in this place are weird. Be more specific." I handed him the pack, watched his reaction. Nothing on his face, not surprise, not confusion. Just that same deadpan mask he wears when he's signing off on an inmate transfer or an injury report. He turned it over in his hand, studied the print. Then he sighed, low and slow, and handed it back. "You don't want to ask questions about inmates like that," he said. "What does that mean?" "It means if you know what's good for you, you log your hours, do your rounds, and don't go poking around anything labeled classified. Understand?" "Is this a psych drug?" He shook his head. "It's not anything. You didn't see it. You didn't give it, and if anyone asks, you were never assigned to Cellblock F." "But I was..." He cut me off with a look, real sharp, real final. "I'm not going to tell you again, Elle. Forget it. That should have been the end of it. But it wasn't. Because I can't forget things once they stick in my gut. And this felt wrong in a way that crawled under my skin. I spent my break in the staff lounge, staring out the wire mesh window at the side yard. Barren concrete. One basketball hoop with no net. I thought about how quiet Combs had been, not scared, not twitchy, but like he was waiting for something, watching it come closer, second by second. And then I thought about what he said. They already gave it to me. I checked the news again later that afternoon, hoping for some kind of update on his case, something to explain the secrecy. But the headlines were stale. Allegations, civil suits, multiple investigations underway, sealed court motions. Nothing new. Nothing about him being moved. Nothing about Cellblock F. Except I did remember the blackout. That was 3 weeks ago. Started with a flicker. Then every light in the facility went dead. Emergency power kicked in 30 seconds later, but we were already down by then. The lockdown lasted the rest of the day. We weren't told why, just that it was internal systems maintenance. But the next day, in the nurse's break room, someone whispered there'd been a riot, supposedly on D block, maybe E over 40 inmates, they said. COs pulled out, modified operations for 72 hours. One of the janitors found a note in a shower drain. "He's not the only one." That was all it said, but it made its way around in whispers. Nobody knew who he was, or what it meant. We thought maybe it was about the Epstein copycat case, or that guy who set fire to the church in Queens. But now I wasn't so sure. Later that shift, I ran into Theo, the psych tech we all call Blue because of his eyes. Real quiet guy, but he notices everything. I asked him straight up, "You know anything about Redline?" His face twitched. Barely, but it was there. "Where'd you hear that?" he asked. "It was in my drawer, logged under my name, for Combs." He rubbed the back of his neck. "You shouldn't say his name out loud." "What not?" "Because someone's listening. Always. You know what they call his tier now." I waited. Echo row. Right? Because sometimes, late at night, guys down the hall start repeating things he says, word for word, same tone, like they're on delay. I didn't believe him, not really, but I didn't laugh either. "I thought he was in psych eval," I said. "Easy, kind of. He's been flagged. Not officially, not the kind that goes on paper. We're monitoring him. Behaviorally." "For what?" Theo hesitated, dropped his voice. "Visual disturbances, sensory disassociation, fear of mirrors." "Mirrors?" He nodded. "One of the guards said he caught Combs tapping on the mirror like it was a window. Said he was trying to talk to someone through it. Called it his other self." That made my stomach twist. Theo leaned closer. "Listen to me. If you hear him screaming, don't go in. Just call it in. Don't open the door. Doesn't matter how bad it sounds." "Well," he just looked at me. Didn't answer. I finished my shift in a fog. checked my card 5 times before rolling it out. I didn't sleep that night. I kept thinking about the package, the note, that sentence. They already gave it to me. The next morning I came in early, wanted to see the logbook, the physical one we keep as backup, every action recorded, signed by hand. I flipped to my entry from yesterday, and there it was. A new line, written in my handwriting. Dose approved. "3:35 a.m. Since stopped the scene, Susie's 28, Damon. Same time as the log I'd found before. Same ink, same pressure, but I didn't write it. I stared at it for a long time, trying to convince myself I must have forgotten, that I'd signed it half awake, but I knew my own writing, and the pen pressure didn't match the pen I'd used that day. It was too fine, too deliberate. Someone had forged my hand, or something worse. I put the book back, closed the drawer, and sat down at the desk. The hum in the ceiling had returned, louder this time, like a low note vibrating through the vents. I looked at the clock. 3:35 a.m. was still hours away, and all I could think about was what might happen the next time that hour rolled around. Chapter 3. The Dose. It was a little past 3 in the morning when the call came through, the kind of hour where the walls breathe heavier and the air smells like metal and sleep deprivation. I was in the infirmary rest area, sipping lukewarm coffee that had been sitting in the pot since midnight. My shift wasn't supposed to involve anything complicated. Routine vitals, inmate complaints, maybe a nosebleed or two. The lights buzzed low. I had one sock on under my scrubs and a heating pad wrapped around my lower back. Then the intercom clicked on with a low crackle. L to Med Station B, oversight request. I stared at the speaker. Nobody used that phrasing. "Copy," I said, though my voice caught in my throat. Med Station B is tucked between the upper infirmary wing and the old psych observation corridor. It's one of those places nobody goes unless they're told to. The hall getting there is colder than the others, like the temperature dips 5 degrees the moment you turn the corner. When I walked in, there was a clipboard waiting on the counter, just sitting there like someone had placed it down seconds before I arrived. On the top page, Administration of Red Line, Mate, SC, Cellblock F, 3:35 a.m. dose. At the bottom, under the line for Supervisor's signature, there was only a short phrase, "This isn't your call." That was it. No initials, no explanation. I stared at the sheet, heart ticking slower than usual. I wanted to call Harris. I wanted to call anyone, but there was no number attached, and something about the silence told me I was already too far in to step out now. I took the blister pack from the drawer where it had somehow reappeared. Same single pill, red, sealed in that glossy shell. No label, no instructions, no notes in the system. I loaded the med card in silence. The wheels squeaked down the hallway. The floors always sound louder when you're the only one walking them. It was exactly 3:35 a.m. when I reached cell 17. He was already at the door. Combs stood there like he hadn't moved since the day before, like he'd been waiting for me. Eyes dry and red-rimmed, face too still. Sweat slicked the sides of his forehead, even though the hallway was cold. He didn't blink much. I slid the hatch open and set the pill cup down on the tray that passed through. "You know what this is," he said, not a question, not even with curiosity, just calm. "They gave this to someone else once. He never came back. I'm not gonna be next." "You don't have to take it," I said quietly. He looked at the pill for a moment, then at me. "They'll say I refused," he muttered. "They'll come anyway. Might as well go out seeing what they see." He took the pill. No hesitation. Swallowed dry. I waited. Just a beat. He didn't change. No convulsions, no gasping, just a slow exhale, like he'd accepted something a long time ago. I logged it. Dose administered, red line, 3:35 a.m. Then I walked away. I returned to the med ward, hands shaking more than I'd admit. I tried to settle back in, tried to tell myself it was just another pill, just another box checked. I made myself take another sip of cold coffee, but something hung in the air that didn't belong there. A weight behind my eyes, like the silence in the corridors had thickened. At 5:12 a.m., I checked the security monitor for cell 17. He was pacing, not just walking, pacing with intention. Tight, fast loops, 4 steps up, 4 steps back, arms twitching at the sides like he was trying to hold them still. His mouth moved, lips forming words, but no sound carried through the screen. I turned up the volume on the feed. Still nothing, just static hum and the squeak of his shoes against the concrete. At 5:44, he was kneeling in the middle of the floor, head low, hands pressed flat to the ground. Then he turned sideways, pressed his ear flat to the floor like he was listening to something underneath. He stayed that way for several minutes. Didn't move. Didn't blink. Just listening. That was when I started writing the incident report. I didn't know what to call it. Inmate exhibiting signs of psychological response to unclassified medication. It sounded too neat. At exactly 6:06 a.m., I looked back at the monitor. He was screaming. I don't mean loud. I mean full-bodied, throat-wrenching animal howling. His back arched, mouth open wide enough I thought it might split at the corners. He wasn't shouting words, just raw, wordless terror, like something was crawling through him, trying to get out. Then the screen went to static. Hard cut. No fade. Just gray fuzz and a high-pitched buzz that made my molars ache. I slammed the side of the monitor, tried to switch channels. Nothing responded. Every feed from F-Block was down, just rows of static-filled screens, one after another. I picked up the phone to call security control. No answer. Tried again. Still nothing. 5 minutes passed like that. Me standing there, watching nothing. Then the screens flickered once and came back. Cell 17 was empty. The door was still locked. The lights were still on, but the cell was empty. No signs of struggle, no broken furniture, no blood, just an unmade cot and a single paper cup lying sideways on the floor. I ran to the system logs, checked every entry for the past 10 minutes. No door had opened, no override, no emergency extraction. The security door at the end of F-Block hadn't registered any traffic. As far as the system was concerned, nothing had happened. Inmate SC had never left. But I knew what I saw. I replayed the footage, from the last clear moment to the static break. I slowed it down. Right before the feed cut out, in the last half-second of visibility, Combs looked up. Looked right at the camera. Right at me. And he smiled. Chapter 4. He never left that room. I reported it immediately. Pulled up the emergency phone line and called Central Control, fingers trembling the whole time. Told them I'd just witnessed a critical event on the F-Block feed. Told them the cell was empty, that the inmate, Sean Combs, was gone. They didn't seem surprised. The man on the other end of the line, voice flat and official, just said, "Copy. We'll check it." No urgency, no shock, like I'd called in a busted light fixture. An hour later, 2 guards from internal security showed up at the infirmary. Tall, both of them, built like retired linebackers. They didn't wear the standard CO uniforms, just black jackets with a patch that said Facility Response Unit. I was told to follow them down to the control center, that they wanted to review the footage with me. Standard protocol, they said. The walk there was quiet, tense. The halls of MDC never really feel clean, but that morning they felt especially wrong, like everything had shifted just a few inches off what was normal. The lights flickered once overhead as we passed through the administrative hallway, and nobody said a word. Inside the control center, they had the surveillance wall up already, every feed from F block glowing in neat little squares. Cell 17's footage, frozen on the last frame before it went to static, the empty cell. That's the image I pointed to. That's what I saw. He's not in there, he vanished. One of the men nodded and turned to the tech. Roll it back, full playback from 6. The footage began. Combs was there, pacing like before. Then he knelt, ear to the floor. And then, there it was again. The screaming. But this time, it wasn't cut. No static, no buzz, no lost signal. He didn't disappear. Instead, the tape showed him slamming his fists against the wall, then collapsing, then crawling to the corner and curling up under the sink. He stayed there the whole time, still, breathing, silent. The timestamp hit 6:06. Nothing changed. No distortion, no glitch. See, the tech said without looking at me. He never left that room. I stared at the screen, my chest going tight. That's not what happened, I said. That's not what I saw. They didn't argue. They didn't deny it outright. They just played it again. Slower this time, different angle. There he was again, face to the camera, no smile, no disappearance, just the same tired man curled on the floor. But I knew that wasn't right. Because when I'd watched it live, he screamed, and then he was gone. So what was this? What about the static? I asked. The 5 minutes of nothing? The tech shrugged. No disruption on our end, no logged errors. Maybe your station monitor glitched. I turned to the security feed map on the wall. Can I see the log of door activity from that hour? Movement reports? The man in the jacket gave me a look. Not angry, not hostile, just firm. It's not for you to review. Why not? Because it's already been accounted for. That was when I realized I wasn't here to be believed. I was here to be corrected. They let me watch the footage 2 more times, each version slightly different. Once I thought I caught something, a flicker at the 6:06 mark, a brief shadow moving along the far wall of the cell. Not shaped like him, not shaped like anyone. I paused it, pointed. There, I said, what's that? The tech leaned in, played it again. This time, the shadow was gone, like it had never been there. Compression artifact, he muttered, nothing to worry about. The man in the black jacket turned to me. Thanks for coming down, Nurse L. You're free to go. They didn't escort me back, just let me walk out. I passed Harris on the way. He wouldn't meet my eyes, didn't say a word. I went straight to the archive room after that, used my personal code to log into the documentation system, and pulled up Combs' file. Most of it was locked. The only accessible pages were the basics: name, ID number, intake date. Everything else was grayed out with a tag that read Restricted Oversight Lockout. I tried to open my own incident report from the night before. It had vanished, gone from the drive. Even the autosave backup folder was empty. When I tried to open a new file to document what I'd seen, the system froze. Then a red message blinked across the screen. Access denied. Level 3 clearance required. I leaned back in the chair, the air in the room feeling too close, like I was being watched from the corners. I opened a new local folder on my flash drive, started typing out what I could remember, just in case. I wrote about the pill, the way he took it, the pacing, the screaming, the disappearance. The tape that didn't match what I saw. The flickers. The shadow. I finished 3 pages before the screen blinked again and the file closed itself. Just like the report. I reached to pull out the flash drive and the computer shut down. Completely. I stared at the black screen, my own reflection warped in the monitor glass. My face looked tired, my eyes not quite mine. I left work early. It didn't stop me. When I got home, there was a manila envelope sitting on my doorstep. No address, no stamps, just my name written in fine black ink across the front. Inside, there was only one thing. A photograph, black and white, grainy but clear enough. It was me, standing at cell 17, holding the red line pill cup through the slot. But the photo wasn't taken from the hallway. It was taken from inside the cell, right behind him, and in the reflection of the polished steel toilet in the corner, something else was standing next to me. Something that looked almost like a person. Almost. Chapter 5. Mouthful of thread. I wasn't assigned to Combs anymore, at least not officially. After the incident with the footage, no one said it out loud, but I could feel it. There was a quiet rerouting of responsibility. His vitals were now someone else's job. His meds, assuming he was still getting any, were logged manually, not digitally. The chart was no longer on our system. When I asked Harris about it, he just said, "That's been elevated to psych monitoring." That was their new phrase for things they didn't want touched. Psych monitoring, like a catch-all drawer for everything inconvenient and dangerous. But I still saw him, still heard him, or I should say, didn't. Because after the dose, after the screaming and the blackout on the monitors and the photo left on my doorstep, Combs stopped talking altogether. Wouldn't respond to COs. Wouldn't move unless physically prompted. Wouldn't make eye contact. They strapped him to a gurney on the 3rd day, only for transport. He hadn't been violent. He hadn't done anything at all. But they said he needed to be watched more closely. He was taken to the isolation wing of the psych unit, a place we normally reserved for acute breakdowns and the occasionally violent schizophrenic episode. I hadn't been in that section in over a year. The last time was for a guy who'd carved hieroglyphics into his own chest. They put Combs in room 3C. No mirror in there. No window. Just concrete, one drain in the center of the floor, and a bed bolted to the wall. It was Jenny, the night nurse, who found him like that. She came back from vitals, pale as paper, said he was sitting up, head tilted like he was listening to something only he could hear, wouldn't answer questions, so she tried to open his mouth to check for swelling. His jaw had been clenched, and that's when she saw it. Black thread, woven between his lips. Not just stuffed in, woven, like he'd been trying to sew them shut. Some of it was still wet with spit, some of it was dried, crusted with blood. There was no needle, no visible entry wound, just the thread, knotted, angled, hugged between the teeth. They had to sedate him to cut it out. I saw it in the biohazard tray, later coiled like a dead thing, blacker than it should have been. It stained the gloves we used, left a smell behind. Not rot, not exactly, more like something burned that shouldn't have caught fire. He didn't fight, not during the sedation, not during the removal. He just stared, straight ahead, unblinking. Other inmates started acting strange after that. Little things at first. The guy in 3D used to beg for Tylenol every morning, refused to sleep for 2 straight days, said he could hear music coming through the walls. When the tech asked what kind, he said it wasn't music exactly, said it sounded like breathing in reverse. Another inmate down in 2A slammed his head into the door until they had to take him to the trauma unit, kept yelling, "He's dreaming too loud! He's dreaming too loud!" over and over until he lost consciousness. They tried to blame it on mold in the vents. But I knew better. One night after rounds, I snuck into the old medical archive. Not the digital stuff, the paper files, the ones they boxed up after we upgraded a few years ago. I had to use a broken key from my old badge just to unlock the filing cabinet. I searched for any mention of Redline. Most of the folders were disorganized, but then I found one thicker than the others, yellowed at the edges. The name had been redacted with marker, but the intake number was still visible. I opened it and started reading. The inmate had been brought in last year. Male, 34, listed as a federal hold, no photo, no full name. The charge was sealed. But the notes, those hadn't been scrubbed. He'd exhibited sudden onset paranoia, said they were coming through the drain, refused food after the first week, cried during sleep cycles, complained of light under his eyelids. There were mentions of a drug trial, unconfirmed. A note, handwritten in the margin, administered 1 Redline capsule, observed behavioral shift within 48 minutes. He died 8 days later. The file listed it as suicide. Hung himself with torn bedsheets. Except there were no photos, no coroner's report. Just a single scrap of notepaper in the back, sealed inside a clear sleeve. On it, scrawled in pencil, barely legible. Black oil on the floor, eyes changed. I don't know what that meant, but I couldn't stop staring at it. I closed the file, heart hammering in my chest. Put back, locked the cabinet. Went home that night, with the lights on in every room. And that's when he spoke again. It had been days. No sound from him. No movement. But at 3:35 a.m., same hour as the dose, he sat up on his cot in the psych unit, turned toward the empty corner of the room, and whispered loud enough to catch on the overhead mic. "It's not me anymore." The nurse on shift paused, leaned toward the speaker. Then he added, "It's what came with me." Chapter 6. The riot wasn't about race. You start hearing things if you stick around MDC long enough. Half-truths wrapped in gossip, passed through guards, janitors, laundry techs. I've learned how to separate the harmless rumors from the ones that have teeth. The riot back in March? That one had teeth. They said it was racial tension. That's the official story that made it to the warden's report, and the limited press that managed to sniff around the edges. Inmate groups clashed over gang territory or something like that. But I knew better. Everyone who actually works inside these walls knew better. The tension didn't come from the usual lines of color or crew. It came from something else entirely, something a lot of people weren't willing to talk about, even now. I didn't push at first. I had enough on my plate between the Redline incident and whatever Combs had become in that locked psych ward. But the memory of that week kept clawing at me. How half the prison went dark without explanation. How tears were sealed off. How nobody on staff could give a straight answer about what kicked it off. I needed to understand it, needed to see how it connected. So I waited until I ran into Dorsey during my late shift. He's a CO who's been around a while, older guy built like a statue, always chewing spearmint gum. We've had enough smoke breaks together that I trusted him, at least more than most of the staff. He was making rounds outside the psych ward when I caught up to him. "You were on duty during the March lockdown, right?" I asked. He squinted at me. "What of it?" "I want to know what really happened, not the version Harris signs off on." He chewed for a long moment, then, without saying anything, motioned with his head. We walked down to the break alcove near the med supply room, out of sight from cameras. "You didn't hear this from me," he said, dropping his voice, "and if you repeat it, I'll call you a liar. Got it?" I nodded. He leaned against the wall, eyes flicking left and right. "Wasn't about race," he said. "Never was. That was the cover story they fed the brass." "What started it then?" He scratched his beard. D12 inmate cleaning crew. They were sent to Combs' old cell before they moved him to isolation, just routine turnover. But one of the guys, Some young Dominican kid started yelling. Next thing we know, he's trying to stab his own ear with a toothbrush shiv. My stomach turned. Why? He said he found something under the bunk, wrapped in gauze and string. Said it was whispering, that it sounded like music, but not really. Not music you could sing along to, more like tones, rhythms that didn't belong. I didn't respond, just waited. We pulled him out, Dorsey went on. But by then, 2 other cells started freaking out. One guy screaming about shadows moving under his skin, another scratching his eyes out. Full-scale panic broke loose in less than 15 minutes. That's what started the riot? He nodded. Yeah, but it wasn't like the usual fights. There wasn't rage in it, not at first. It was confusion, like they were trying to get away from something they couldn't see. Guys tripping over each other, howling. You ever see a full-grown man try to claw through cinder block with his fingers? You don't forget it. What did they find under the bunk? He looked at me for a long time. Don't know. The warden's boys took it, wrapped it up in one of those black bags they use for high contam. Didn't even log it in the evidence locker, straight to oversight. Of course it was. Did anyone leave a note? Anything written down? He paused. There was a message scratched into the door of the inmate who kicked off the chaos. Took it out with a nail file, real deep. Said, "It followed the music." He didn't say anything else, just walked away. I stood there a while, trying to piece it together. The gauze-wrapped thing under the bunk, the red-line dose, the music that wasn't music, Combs whispering about what came with him. Later that night, after my rounds were finished, I opened my locker to swap into my civilian shoes. And there it was again, the red-line blister pack. I hadn't seen it in days. I was sure it had been taken during the file purge. But there it was. Only now, the word red line had been scratched out. Deliberately. Etched in crooked letters across the surface, through the plastic casing, was a new word. Confessions. And inside the pack, still the single red capsule. Wait, Chapter 7. Oversight. I didn't drive myself there. They sent a car. Black. Lincoln, no plates I could see. Windows too dark to catch a reflection. The driver didn't say a word, just nodded once when I got in and kept his eyes locked on the road the entire way. We didn't take the usual routes either. No bridges, no known exits. Just back roads and long, straight stretches of nothing that looked like the outer rim of New Jersey, or maybe somewhere near the edge of the state line. I didn't ask questions. I didn't want to know the answers. They'd left the envelope in my locker after shift. No seal, just a printed time and place. 4 Medical Transport Dock 3, Level 2. That level doesn't show up on our building map. I only knew it existed because I'd once seen someone swipe a badge in an elevator that skipped right over it. I should have thrown the envelope away. Should have quit. Should have reported it. But instead, I followed instructions, like I always did. Like they knew I would. The facility wasn't labeled. It sat behind a steel gate buried under 2 security checkpoints, and when I stepped inside, the air smelled like disinfectant and server heat. The kind of place where the walls feel too smooth, too blank, like no one's supposed to leave fingerprints. A man was waiting for me in the interview room. He wore a clean, pale gray suit, crisp shirt, no badge, no name tag. His shoes didn't make a sound when he stood. "Thank you for coming," he said. His voice had no real texture, the kind of tone you'd hear in a tutorial video or a voicemail menu. I wasn't sure I had a choice, I said. He smiled politely. "You always have a choice, but fewer options the further down you go." The room was wide, 1 table, 2 chairs. No windows, no cameras that I could see. But I felt them anyway. Somewhere, someone was watching. He gestured for me to sit, then placed a folder on the table between us. Before I could speak, he started listing things. My mother's name, her ongoing chemo treatment at a clinic in Connecticut, my brother's DUI last winter, the one that never showed up on his record because a court clerk marked it as incomplete documentation, my address, the names of my 2 high school teachers, the date I lost my virginity, the fact that I used to keep a box cutter in my locker for cutting apples even though it wasn't technically allowed. He knew it all, not just the obvious stuff, the private stuff, the things no one ever says out loud. "You've been flagged as a compliant asset," he said when I didn't respond. "No disciplinary issues, no legal conflicts, no serious ideological disruption. We like that." I stared at the folder. "What is this?" "This," he said, tapping the label, "is context." I read it. "Project Wilking, Phase 2, Clearance." What does that mean? He didn't answer right away. Instead, he opened the folder and slid a series of photographs toward me. They were grainy, surveillance quality. One showed Combs, mouth slack, eyes wide, sweat blooming through his shirt. He was facing a mirror, his hand pressed against it, mouthing something I couldn't make out. Another was of a man I vaguely recognized, maybe an actor or producer, hunched over in a hospital bed, his pupils blown wide, tubes running from his nose, scratches all over his arms. The next showed a young pop star in an isolation cell, her face painted in smears of something dark and oily, the word silence scrawled in lipstick across the wall behind her. More images followed, each one worse than the last. The subjects weren't just breaking down mentally, they were unraveling, faces distorted by fear or ecstasy or both, mouths open wide in screams or prayer. "This isn't about one man," he said softly. "This is a pattern, a measurable response to sustained exposure." "Exposure to what?" He paused, smiled. "You asked what red line is?" I nodded. "It's not what," he said, folding his hands. "It's who." I felt my skin crawl. "These individuals," he continued, tapping the photos, "each encountered a signal. Not audible in the traditional sense, not measurable by civilian instruments, but traceable, recurring, highly reactive in individuals with specific neurological signatures, power, influence, charisma, what you might call cultural reach. You're testing them," I whispered. "We're observing. Redline is not the subject, he's the conductor." My throat felt tight. "You mean Combs?" "We prefer not to use names. He's simply a case study, one of many." I looked at the charts inside the folder. Rows of data, graphs marked with erratic spikes, chemical breakdowns I didn't recognize, labels like auditory hallucination threshold and ego deconstruction interval, and personality split divergence. I reached the final page. It had a title printed across the top, Spiritual Disoxidation Index. Underneath were 3 names. Only one was blacked out. The other 2 I recognized. One of them was dead. The other had recently vanished from the public eye under the guise of a creative sabbatical. "This isn't medicine," I said. "This is experimentation." "It's research," the man said calmly. "You can either continue assisting or be relocated." "Relocated where?" He tilted his head. "You won't remember." I pushed back from the table, heart pounding. I never agreed to any of this. He tapped the folder again. "You did the moment you gave the dose?" I left the facility with the same driver. Didn't speak the whole way home. The highway looked unfamiliar, like we were looping endlessly. I must have fallen asleep because when I opened my eyes, we were parked in front of my apartment building, the sky just beginning to lighten behind the clouds. I climbed the stairs in a daze, opened the door, dropped my bag by the coat rack. And that's when I saw it. On the kitchen counter next to the sink. A plastic hospital wristband. Still coiled. Still damp. My name on the chart. My initials on the dosage log. But the name etched into the band wasn't mine. It was his. sawn cones, and wrapped around the band, tied tight like a bow, was a single black thread. Chapter 8. The Confession. I don't remember who gave me the file. Could have been slipped under my door, handed off by a gloved palm in the hallway, left between pages of my clipboard while I was counting pills. However it got to me, it was unmarked except for one small phrase scratched into the plastic case. Play alone. I waited until after my shift, closed the blinds in the nurse's station, locked the door, turned the volume low, plugged in a cheap pair of wired headphones I kept for emergencies. I didn't know what I expected to hear. Maybe a leak from psych, maybe a prank. But the timestamp on the file gave me a chill before I even hit play. 3:35 a.m. It starts with silence. Rough silence. Not the kind where nothing happens, but the kind where something's breathing just off mic. You can hear the static of bad wiring, the soft hiss of fluorescent bulbs buzzing somewhere in the background. And then, like a gunshot, without warning, the first scream. It's him, Combs. And he's not just yelling. He's tearing at something inside himself, its full body, howls pulled from the back of the throat, layered over guttural retching and words you can't quite make out. It goes on for almost 30 seconds, unbroken, until the scream shatters into sobbing. Then a whisper. A dry, fluttering whisper, like someone praying into a broken fan. I see them, all of them, around the mirror, all smiling. The boy is still inside. He never left. He watches me when I sleep. There's the sound of scratching like fingernails on glass. Then, the room underneath the room. That's where the wild king waits, and his court wears no faces. Only names. He starts saying names then. Some are slurred, some clear. A few I recognize, public names, people tied to old headlines and sealed cases. Others are unfamiliar. Maybe aliases. Maybe things that don't belong in human mouths. The more he says, the softer his voice becomes, until he's not speaking anymore, just mouthing them. That's when the beat starts. Faint like a stereo through four walls, a low, pulsing rhythm, off-kilter and warped. Not music, not really, just the sensation of sound. Like a heartbeat trying to keep time with a record that won't stop skipping. Then silence. Not a fade out, just cut, like the tape ends there. I sat there for a long time after it stopped. Didn't breathe right for a minute or two. I brought the file to someone I thought I could trust, a psych tech who'd worked here longer than me. I didn't say where it came from, just asked him to listen. He did. And when it was done, he handed me back the headphones and said only one thing. You can't drug a man's past without inviting the thing he buried with it. I didn't ask him to explain. I couldn't have handled it if he had. 2 nights later, they brought Combs back to the infirmary. Just for observation, they said. Short term. He walked in under his own power. No restraints. No screaming. He looked fine. Cleaned up. His beard trimmed, his skin clear, even his eyes. Normal. Too normal. Like someone had pressed a reset button and wiped away the static. He nodded politely as he passed me, sat quietly on the cot, even asked for water. And when I handed it to him, he smiled and said, "Thank you." Then he hummed, just a little tune under his breath. Familiar. Something I think I heard in the background of that audio, something that looped. The staff bought it, logged it as a successful stabilization. But I didn't. I watched him through the glass that night. Sat in the corridor with the lights dimmed, pretending to fill charts, while I kept my eyes on that cell. And at exactly 3:35 a.m., he turned his head slowly toward the door, tilted it like he was listening to something, and smiled again. Like he knew I was still watching. I left before my shift ended. I couldn't take one more second in that place. When I got home, there was something waiting in my locker. No note, no label, just a black thumb drive in a padded envelope tucked beside my scrubs. On one side, written in faint white ink, for her, testimony. I haven't plugged it in yet. I don't know if I ever will. Some nights I hear the humming again. In my dreams, in the pipes, beneath the rustle of vents and hospital air. A looped rhythm, deep and distorted, echoing in the walls like water that never quite stops dripping. I don't sleep much, and sometimes when I check the mirror, I don't look at my reflection too long, because now I wonder if the boy in the mirror ever left, if he was ever just a boy, or if he's just waiting for someone else to open the door again. I don't know what I gave him, but it didn't end with him.